For years, Manchester United fans have been looking at this railway track as a bit of a hindrance, an obstacle as to why major renovations can't take place on this stadium and why they're looking to build a whole new stadium. Of course, you'll know they've got three larger sides to Old Trafford, but over in the distance, the Sir Bobby Charlton stand can't be properly renovated, can't be expanded because of this railway track. But I'd argue, without the railways, Manchester United wouldn't exist. So it's one of the most fitting features of Old Trafford. So around 150 years ago, of course, this club wasn't even called Manchester United. As you know, they were known as Newton Heath LYR Football Club, the LYR standing for Lancashire and Yorkshire Railways. Now, it was those workers who'd create the club. Those humble beginnings, the workers would be shocked to learn what the club would become, the beast it is today. But that's not even the craziest part of the story, because today we're going to visit the two previous grounds Manchester United played at before moving to Old Trafford in 1910, and also how the club almost went bust. Oh yes, they almost went bankrupt, into liquidation, if it wasn't for a fundraising event and a wandering dog, a giant St. Bernard called Major. So ladies and gents, this is the story of how Manchester United were saved by a dog. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and let's go. So ladies and gents, it was right here the Manchester United story began. I'm currently stood in the middle of a roundabout. I've got to be careful because you've got the Greater Manchester Police over there. But it was somewhere around here that Manchester United's first stadium was. Now this used to be, I'll try not to get run over, this used to be North Road. It's currently known as Northampton Road, and it is, of course, as I said, where Manchester United's first ground was. Founded all the way back in 1878, of course, as Newton Heath LYR Football Club. They were basically a railway club, no billionaire owner like the Glazer family, merely a team consisting of workers from, again, the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, from the wagon and carriage department, I believe, just looking for something to do in their spare time, looking for other railway teams to play, and obviously had no idea quite what Manchester United would become. Now, apparently there was a plaque somewhere commemorating this place and its significance, but that was stolen a long time ago. Now, apparently the green and gold, which has obviously become famous from the protests against the Glazers, was a reflection of the colours the railway company they worked for had. Something like that. There's definitely a connection to the railways again with the green and gold. Now, it was right here that that first ground was built. Notice I said ground, not stadium, because again, humble beginnings. Now, apparently the pitch was somewhere near this roundabout, and it could hold around 15,000 spectators, but you didn't have all the padded seats, all the hospitality, all the stuff you get nowadays in Premier League stadiums. This was very basic. You had the banks around the outside, like many grounds were back then. You did have some wooden stands, but it was very primitive. It was very basic, and of course it was merely meters away from steam trains passing by. So often the players would just be surrounded by steam, fog, barely could see, which again is really significant and really ironic that to this day Old Trafford is right next to the railway track. But they still obviously wanted to progress, and they did, with that ambition, encounter some problems along the way. And again, little did they know that their survival, or the survival of the club, would somewhat depend on a dog. Again, we'll get back to that story in a moment. Let's learn more about the history and keep exploring the early history of what would become Manchester United Football Club. So here we go then, guys. Manchester United Stadium number 2. I'm currently on Bank Street. Now, there is a plaque further up, so we're just going to walk to the plaque, which commemorates this being the second ground of Manchester United. Now, they moved here in 1893, and of course they stayed here until the move to Old Trafford in 1910. Now, they moved here again to progress as a club. By the time they leave to go to Old Trafford, they could hold up to around 50,000 spectators, so it definitely was worth the move, but it also came at a cost. Now, we'll get onto that in a moment, because you can see confirmation over there, the Bank Street ground, former home of Manchester United, the plaque looking directly upon where the site once was. Now it's currently the National Cycling Centre, I believe. I think they do BMXing over there as well. We'll go and check it out. But it was on that site that Manchester United would become Manchester United. Of course, we said they were founded as Newton Heath, LYR, Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway. They'd start to distance themselves from the railways over time, become their own identity. So they dropped a part of their name, just become Newton Heath. And then of course, we're gone to why, or the significance of how a dog led them to become Manchester United and the giant they are today. So I've walked onto the site of the National Cycling Centre. You can see here something about BMXing. I'll be honest, it's not really my thing, but I am interested in football history. So let's go and have a look what it looks like now. Bank Street over there in the distance. Now the biggest irony of this is we're very, very close to the Etihad Stadium, of course the home of Manchester City. We'll go and show you how close this site is to City's current home in a moment. But again, it was right here where they got themselves into a bit of financial bother. Again, we said they were somewhat ambitious. They'd increase renovations to the ground, again, getting more and more people through the turnstiles, through the gates, increased player wages, of course, rather than just playing for fun, for something to do as railway workers. They then became professionals. And obviously with those ground renovations, that all added to the cost as well. But those costs came at a price. They had all sorts of people knocking at the door saying, you owe me money. And they'd run up debts to around 2,600 quid, which again, I guess is chump's change in the modern game. What would 2,600 quid get you today? It'd barely get you a couple of season tickets at Old Trafford, wouldn't it? But back then it was a lot of money. Now, captain at the time, Harry Stafford, would sometimes do fundraisers, again, to try and raise funds for the club, for Newton Heath. And he had a very popular dog called Major. Now, this was a St. Bernard dog. Again, I've used that as a hook for this video. Now, this St. Bernard dog would have a little collection box around his neck. So he'd walk round, he'd do crowd, ironically, as the dog just turned up over here in the park. This is all coming together nicely, guys. So he'd wander around, obviously taking donations, again, to help keep the club alive. Now, the dog wandered off, basically got lost, went missing. Who was to find the dog? Well, a wealthy brewer, businessman, essentially. So businessmen always get their hands on football clubs eventually, don't they? His daughter found the dog, should I say. Now, this guy was called John Henry Davis, and he said, can I keep your dog? My daughter loves Major, the St. Bernard, and of course, club captain. Harry said no, of course not, but he did mention the debt of the club. So they came to an agreement. Look, if my daughter can have your dog, can look after Major, I'll clear the debt. So him, along with some others, including Captain Harry, cleared the debt, and of course in the process, distanced themselves from that Newton Heath name, changed the name, changed the colours to the red and white, so Manchester United was born. So they would play here briefly as Manchester United, and it was right here on this site that they'd win their first ever league title in 1908. They'd also win the FA Cup here as well. So before they'd even moved to Manchester United and grew the legacy, the dynasty, the success, it all started just across the road from these buildings. Really is a cool story. Humble beginnings again. I really enjoy this part of making YouTube videos, learning about the history, because again, growing up as a bit of a glory hunting Manchester United fan, these are things that get overlooked. We get so consumed with the trophies, with the success, but none of that would have been possible without a St. Bernard wandering around with a collection box around his neck. So here we go then, guys, a better view of the National Cycling Centre, the home of British cycling. Again, I'm not really bothered about that, but again, the former home of Manchester United. Now, as we said, in 1902, that's the year of the potential death of Manchester United. The debt's been around 2,600 quid. Now, we mentioned John Henry Davis, but it was actually 4 local businessmen who all chipped in 500 quid. I know it doesn't sound like much today. Along with the captain, they'd all put the money in, and that little consortium, I guess, saved the club. So 1902, as we said again, the club was saved and was renamed Manchester United. The following year, right here in 1903, they'd appoint a new manager, Ernest Magnell. Now this guy was pretty significant as well because they were in the second division of English football at the time. He got them promoted as runners-up in 1906. We mentioned winning the league title for the first time in 1908. That would follow on with a Charity Shield win and their very first FA Cup. Now, ground here, again we mentioned the proximity to the Etihad. Etihad's over there, you can see the roof, well you probably can't, but they've got that weird like wiring, haven't they, on top of the roof. Now, Ernest Magnall would leave Manchester United after that little bit of success and go to the noisy neighbours. Imagine Alex Ferguson did that in 2008. The investor come in and said, Fergie, we want you at City. Well, Magnall kind of did it a bit backward. He'd had the investment from Manchester United and he would leave to go and join the rivals, Manchester City. What a fantastic shot this is, guys. You've got the canal down there and you've got the Etihad Stadium in the distance. Look how close that is to the National Cycling Centre. Surely that's a closer proximity than Anfield and Goodison Park, of course separated by Stanley Park. And I'd say that's closer again than Notts County and Nottingham Forest with the River Trent. You've got a canal, not a river, separating these two. But just imagine, guys, Manchester United had stayed here. Incredible. So then guys, as we make our way down St Matt Busby Way, of course, thousands of United fans will make this trip every home match day. Down here, you've got Lou Macara's fish and chip shop over there, all the usual stuff that normally gets the spotlight. But who'd have thought that a mere wandering dog joined a collection fund to try and keep the club, which wasn't even called Manchester United at the time, alive. Now, if you watch like Final Destination, the films, obviously it ends in tragedy. One little thing can have a trigger a series of events, ultimately leading in death. This didn't lead to death, but you can look at it also from a positive perspective. If he hadn't have gone out collecting money, if the dog hadn't have wandered off, if the daughter of a wealthy local businessman, a brewer, hadn't been around and found the dog and grew fond of the dog, and if club captain Harry hadn't have made contact with John and his daughter, maybe, just maybe, this would have ended like Final Destination. As another train passes by, maybe we should no longer look at this train track as a bloody hindrance. Maybe United fans will look at it as a beautiful reminder of the humble beginnings of those railway workers of Newton Heath, Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, and how a dog, a St Bernard named Major, all came together like Final Destination. One little piece of the puzzle creates this whole picture. One move creates this series of events, which in Final Destination always ends in death, and it could have ended in death before even becoming Manchester United. It didn't. Those series of events, without the railway, without the dog, without the investors, Manchester United would never have become the powerhouse they are today. So whether you're a Manchester United fan or just a lover of football history like me, make sure you do hit that like button, subscribe for more football stories as we explore England, Scotland, around Europe, and learn more about the beautiful game we all love. So I'll see you in the next one.